For 3 minutes, the ocean went silent. The Escort's sonar, its single most important sense, returned nothing but empty water. No echo, no bearing, no contact. In the middle of a hostile ocean, that silence was worse than a warning. Because submarines didn't simply vanish. They hid. They crept. They waited. The officer of the watch faced a decision measured not in minutes, but in seconds. Break formation and risk the convoy, or hold course and trust the silence. The rules were clear. The manuals were precise. And yet, when the order was given, it violated everything Escort commanders had been taught. Depth charges rolled into the sea anyway. Then the water erupted. Explosions tore through the surface in violent succession, lifting columns of water skyward. Oil surged upward. Debris followed. And somewhere below, something that had been invisible moments earlier was being torn apart. Those 3 lost minutes would change how Escort ships fought submarines for the rest of the war. In the early years of World War II, anti-submarine warfare was losing. Allied convoys crossed oceans under constant threat from German U-boats and later Japanese submarines. Escorts were stretched thin. Technology lagged behind tactics, and the enemy understood the limits better than anyone. Sonar, then called ASTIC-C, was revolutionary, but imperfect. It worked best when conditions were ideal and targets behaved predictably. But submarines adapted. They slowed. They changed depth. They exploited thermal layers. Most importantly, they learned how to disappear just long enough to escape. Escort doctrine was rigid. Lose contact and you reacquire. Don't attack unless you're certain. Depth charges were precious. Guessing wasted ammunition, and worse, revealed your position. U-boat commanders depended on this caution. They knew escorts hesitated when sonar contact broke. They relied on those moments to slip away beneath convoys, reload, and strike again. Entire Wolfpack tactics were built around exploiting escort uncertainty. The cost was staggering. By 1942, Allied shipping losses peaked at catastrophic levels. Thousands of sailors died without ever seeing their attacker. Entire convoys vanished. Escorts did their best, but too often arrived one step behind an enemy that seemed to know their rules better than they did. What was missing was not technology. It was confidence. Confidence to act when information was incomplete. Confidence to trust probability over certainty. Confidence to accept that sometimes the only way to kill what you cannot see is to assume it is still there. That realization would come not from high command, but from one escort ship, one moment of silence, and one decision made without permission. The escort was not famous. The officer was not reckless, and the patrol had begun like dozens before it. But when contact vanished, he refused to believe the ocean had gone empty. Instead, he treated silence as evidence. What followed would force navies to rethink everything they believed about sonar probability and how long a submarine could truly hide. Not everyone approved. Some senior officers viewed Walker's tactics as dangerous precedent. Blind attacks risked wasting limited depth, charged stocks. They encouraged aggressiveness that could leave convoys exposed. ASTIC, critics argued, was meant to provide certainty, not probability. Walker disagreed. He documented everything. Every attack. Every contact loss. Every instance where pressure, continuous, relentless pressure, forced submarines into mistakes. His after-action reports emphasized tempo. If escorts paused, submarines recovered. If pressure never let up, submarines broke. The results spoke loudly. Between 1942 and 1944, Walker's escort groups destroyed more U-boats than any other Royal Navy formation. HMS Starling alone was credited with 14 confirmed submarine kills, many following exactly the same pattern: contact lost, attack continued, ocean erupting. Skepticism faded slowly, but it faded. Other escort commanders began copying the method. They attacked last known positions aggressively. They trusted pattern, not perfection. They stopped treating sonar silence as safety. Training changed. Escort crews were taught that losing contact was part of the hunt, not the end of it. They learned to read water conditions, estimate submarine behavior, and coordinate attacks without waiting for perfect data. The submarine's greatest weapon, uncertainty, was being turned against it. By late 1943, Walker's approach had become doctrine. The Royal Navy formalized the concept of creeping attack and barrage pursuit, tactics that assumed submarines would attempt to vanish, and built that assumption into the response. Depth charges were no longer held back for certainty, they were used to deny the enemy time. The impact was immediate and devastating. U-boat commanders reported unprecedented pressure. Escorts no longer disengaged. Attacks continued for hours. Some submarines were forced so deep their hulls collapsed. Others surfaced under fire, their crews abandoning ship. German naval logs captured the panic. Submariners wrote of oceans that never went quiet, of escorts that would not let go, of attacks that continued long after they believed contact was lost. The Atlantic began to change. In May 1943, the Germans suffered what they would later call Black May. Dozens of U-boats were destroyed in a single month. Wolfpack tactics collapsed. Admiral Carlden Nitz withdrew many submarines from the Atlantic, conceding, temporarily, the battle he had once dominated. Technology mattered, but tempo mattered more. Radar improved, weapons evolved. But it was the willingness to act decisively in uncertainty that broke the submarine threat. All because one escort ship refused to treat 3 minutes of silence as escape. The moment silence stopped being trusted, the Battle of the Atlantic changed character. Escort actions became longer, harder, and more decisive. Where U-boats once relied on breaking contact to survive, they now faced enemies who treated disappearance as a cue to intensify the attack. One of the clearest demonstrations came in early 1943, during a series of convoy battles in the North Atlantic Gap, the vast stretch of ocean beyond effective land-based air cover. Here, German submarines had once operated with near impunity. Under the new doctrine, that advantage evaporated. When escorts lost sonar contact, they did not disengage. They tightened the noose. Depth charges were laid in overlapping patterns. Ships rotated roles, some holding the datum, others sweeping ahead to cut off escape routes. Attacks continued for hours, sometimes through the night. U-boat logs captured the experience vividly. Submarine commanders described pressure that never relented. Each attempt to evade only triggered another barrage. Even when escorts temporarily overshot, they returned within minutes. The ocean became hostile at every depth. One engagement typified the shift. A U-boat shadowing a convoy lost contact with its target after an initial attack failed. Moments later, escorts detected it briefly, then lost the echo. Instead of breaking off, they attacked the last known position repeatedly, adjusting depth and spacing with each pass. After several hours, oil and debris surfaced. The convoy sailed on. Incidents like this multiplied rapidly. By April and May 1943, Allied escort groups, many trained directly or indirectly on Walker's methods, were destroying submarines faster than Germany could replace them. Entire wolfpacks were detected, harried, and broken apart before coordinated attacks could be launched. This culminated in May 1943, when German losses reached unsustainable levels. That month alone, over 40 U-boats were destroyed, many in prolonged escort actions where contact had been lost and deliberately re-attacked. Survivors reported escorts that would not stop and attacked even when nothing was heard. The psychological impact was as damaging as the physical losses. U-boat captains, once aggressive hunters, became cautious. Patrols shortened. Attacks were abandoned earlier. Submarines withdrew from convoys that showed signs of determined escort coordination. For the first time in the war, submarines were reacting to escorts, not the other way around. The strategic consequences of this shift were decisive. Before 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic had been a race between shipbuilding and sinking. The Allies built faster, the Germans destroyed faster. The outcome remained uncertain. After 1943, the equation changed. Effective escort tactics, built on continuous pressure and probabilistic attack, reduced the submarine threat to manageable levels. Convoys arrived intact more often. loss rates fell. Merchant crews regained confidence. The impact reached far beyond shipping statistics. Secure sea lanes allowed the buildup of forces for Operation Overlord. Fuel, vehicles, ammunition. And troops crossed the Atlantic in numbers that would have been impossible just a year earlier. The invasion of Normandy depended on maritime security, and that security depended on escorts willing to attack, even when certainty vanished. German leadership recognized the defeat. Admiral Karl Dönitz later acknowledged that Allied escort coordination and relentless pursuit had broken the effectiveness of the U-boat arm. New technologies could not compensate for the loss of tactical freedom at sea. In strategic terms, the ocean had been reclaimed, not by a single invention, but by a change in mindset. Uncertainty was no longer paralyzing, it was actionable. After the war, anti-submarine warfare doctrine changed permanently. Modern navies no longer treat sensor loss as failure. They plan for it. Training emphasizes last known position attacks, probability-based targeting, and continuous pressure. Principles born from those wartime escort actions. The lesson was simple, but profound: absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Captain Frederick John Walker did not invent sonar, depth charges, or convoy escort. What he changed was how officers interpreted silence. He replaced hesitation with hypothesis and acted on it. Today, whether hunting submarines, tracking aircraft, or countering cyber threats, militaries still apply the same principle. Do not wait for certainty if delay benefits the enemy. The ocean that once hid submarines became a place of constant danger, because escorts learned that disappearance was often a trick, not an escape. This story begins with silence, 3 minutes with no signal, no echo, no confirmation. In war, silence is tempting. It invites pause. It suggests safety. For years, escort doctrine treated it as such. An absence that meant disengage, conserve, and search again. But submarines thrived in that pause. One escort ship refused to accept the silence. One commander chose to believe that disappearance was a tactic, not a miracle. The result was not just a kill. It was a transformation. By attacking uncertainty instead of waiting for clarity, Allied escorts stripped submarines of their greatest advantage. The ocean stopped being a place to hide and became a place to be hunted, relentlessly. World War II is often remembered for technological breakthroughs. Radar, sonar, code breaking. But technology alone does not decide wars. Interpretation does. A tool is only as effective as the doctrine that governs its use. And sometimes, changing that doctrine requires nothing more than the courage to act when information is incomplete. 3 minutes of silence, and then the ocean exploded. If you appreciate deep, documentary-style World War II history that explores how small decisions reshaped entire campaigns, consider liking this video and subscribing. These stories are built from patrol logs, action reports, and first-hand accounts, revealing how war is often decided not by certainty, but by judgment under pressure. Tell us in the comments, which hidden WB moment should we uncover next? A failed sensor, a misunderstood order, a decision that changed everything without anyone realizing at the time. More untold histories are coming.